Okay, we have three more people for you to listen to tonight. The first is George Marrett. A great number of you know who he is already. George Marrett is a product of the ROTC program, Air Force ROTC program. He hails from California. He went to UPT and Webb way back in 1959. And he started off with the Air Defense Command, the 84th Fighter Interceptor Squadron, flying 101s. Flew that for 4 years and was selected for test pilot school. At test pilot school at Edwards Air Force Base, he flew a variety of airplanes, as most of the people there do. F-111, F-5, F-4, and F-104. I think every pilot here would admit flying those airplanes in a non-combat situation sounds like it's a lot of fun to me. He did go to combat though. He went to the A-1, he went to the 602nd Fighter Squadron. At that time it was at Udorn, and shortly after he got there it moved to NKP, the base that we all love so well. He flew there for a year, 188 combat missions. Then went to the Hughes Airplane Company to be a test pilot for the next 20 years. Again, flying airplanes that I think in a non-combat environment with nobody shooting at you would be a lot of fun to do. F-14, F-111B, and the F-4 again. He retired in 1989. They've got a warbird museum that he founded, the Australia Warbird Museum in California, and he still flies. And he's come back to his senses again. He flies something with a propeller on it and something with a tail whip. The Stetson that many of you military people know as the L5. He's an author. He can not only read, but he can write. That's why he's not in the Marine Corps. He has written 6 books. I think there's a couple of examples in here floating around right now. I've peeked at them. Very informative, very enjoyable books. He's been married. Now here comes another major what do you call it? Accomplishment in a man's life. He's been married to the same woman for 66 years. George, would you like to talk about this mission debrief?
She's still there.
Wife Jan, stand up, of 66 years old. She actually wrote most of the books.
I actually have been given a duty. While he's speaking, I'm taking pictures.
All right.
Well, I want to thank Jim for screwing up the start of the evening so much that it's really going to make Susan and I look very good. So thank you so much for the other thing I want to bring up is knowing Skyraider pilots, there's sometimes a tendency to maybe drink a little bit too much or overact a little bit too much. So, in mind of that, I'm going to ask a question to just see the caliber of the audience that I have this evening. But here's the question. What is the greatest unsolved aviation mystery? Unsolved, the greatest aviation unsolved mystery. Help me out.
Who flew the coop?
How you got through flight training?
Some people think it's Amelia Earhart. It's not that. People think it's the aliens at Roswell. How about Malaysia 370? No. The greatest unsolved aviation mystery. Why did Japanese kamikaze pilots wear helmets? I asked that question. Okay, let me start off by telling you I'm going to talk about the rescue of PAPAYA 02 Alpha and Bravo. Take you back to March 10th of 1969. This story and all the other stories that I've talked about in the last couple of nights are in my book, Cheating Death. I was published by the Smithsonian Institute Press in 2002. I think I've given a lot of those copies away. So take you back to March 10th. I was Sandy lead at NKP. This is typically how our type of airplanes, a jungle survival boots, cotton flying suit, helmet, the vest everybody carried. We carried 2 radios, 3 batteries. We knew as Sandys that your lifeline was of coming back was the radio. That was very good. So we're on alert. I was a Sandy lead, had been in theater for a little over 10 months, not too long to be going home. My second was a guy by the name of Al Moreland, not around anymore. Third was Jerry Jenkinson, Sweet Eyes. He was in a class behind me at Hurlburt, finished out his tour, went to Webb Air Force Base as an instructor, got killed with a student in a spin, didn't recover. My number 4 guy was little Rex Huntman, and it was interesting. Rex was one of these guys that had just gone through flight school, went through the A1 training at Hurlburt, came over to Southeast Asia, and as you recall, you could make first lieutenant in about 18 months. So most of the guys that had done that came over as first lieutenant, but Rex came over as a second lieutenant. So it was a challenge to get him combat ready as a second lieutenant, and by God, we did it. So he was a good man. So here's what happened. An F-4D from the 435th Tactical Fighter Squadron at Ubon was making several passes over petroleum area, lubricant storage, and truck park. During its fifth pass, it was hit and went down. Both pilots ejected. The FAC saw parachutes in the air, saw the parachutes on the ground, was in radio contact with both pilots. That's when we got scrambled at NKP. This area that they went down was not too far from Chapone, 5-10 miles kind of northwest, and off we go. I'd been in Chapone many times, not a good area. Things weren't looking good. Took us 45 minutes or so to get there. Again, this was March 10th, so it's the end of the dry season. And it rained for 6 months, and we had the haze and smoke of 6 months, so that typically went up practically at times to 10,000 feet before you saw a nice clear horizon. And visibility is a couple miles and all of that. So you inch along, you look for survivors. So I got there, made radio contact with the FAC, and he said the front seater's parachute had disappeared, and also he was now in radio contact anymore. The back seater was good. So that was of concern to us. No radio, things don't look good. So I made radio contact with the back seater. Long story short, typically type of mission where we brought in the fast movers, put a lot of ordnance down, cleared it up. I made a pass, asked them if they're still shooting at us, looking kind of good. The other interesting thing at that time period, my recollection was we were asked to use this disabling gas. I think it was CBU 19. And we were requested to use it on every rescue. It was the kind of thing that you really used when the pilot was up in a tree and maybe the enemy was at the base of the tree, so nobody could put ordnance in that close. So the idea is you come in with this riot control gas. It's called juicy fruit was the code word for that. So it was my understanding we were supposed to use it on every mission. The hobos were airborne, it was on its way, so I chose to use it in the way that it was just a smoke screen, a little bit downwind. Made my last pass across him. He said, everything's good, so bring the jollies in. The jollies came in and picked him up. And we got out of there. To my knowledge, nobody was hit. And now we had one guy on board. Of course, we still had one helicopter that was in reserve. And so I sent the helicopter home. I think he probably went back to Ubon. It was as close to Ubon as NKP. But now what to do with the missing one, which would be PAPAYA 02 Alpha. And without any radio contact or any visual contact, there really wasn't much we could do but circle for a while, listen to the radio, call on guard, and see if anybody came up. And nobody did, so we went home. So it was interesting because that's one of the stories in the book that's really about all I knew until I met Susan a number of years ago. She was planning to go over to Laos and do some investigation for the front seater. So through her, I found out the name of the back seater. It was a guy by the name of Al Rutna. Let me move on here. I guess I should, for those of you that are not aware, obviously this is Nakhon Phanom, Udorn. Went down someplace about right in here. So this is the direction that we went. Hot area because Medea Pass, Vancouver Pass, all this was the Ho Chi Minh Trail. So we all know that this was not a good area to get down. Anyhow, I met, let me go through. Anyhow, this is typical. This actually is a 130 and a HH3, which is what we use. And that's the Mekong River with the karst up towards the northwest. We actually headed south, so we were going that way. So this is not the actual rescue. This is Al, lives in Pennsylvania. Gave him a call. He was a Texas Aggie, backseater of an F4. He was a pilot system operator. Remember, guys right out of school were in the backseat of F4s. So I heard about how he ended up ejecting and how he really did a fantastically good job of working with me so that we could pick him up. Yeah, Texas Aggie. So anyhow, he managed to get in the front seat, became an IP, flew 2 more combat tours. So he had hundreds of combat missions, ended up staying in the Air Force for 27 years, became a full colonel, and retired. Interesting thing for me was that he said that he was single at the time he flew combat in Southeast Asia. After combat, he got married, had a son and daughter. Susan put me in touch with the son, and when I talked with the son over the phone, he said, you know, if you hadn't picked up my dad, there wouldn't be me. I don't know that we always thought of things like that, of what would go on. So there's Al coming off the airplane after he had been rescued. So now I'm going to turn it over to Susan, and she'll tell you a little more of this story, and then I'll come up here at the end and we'll end it together.
Roger, I've got it. You need to test Timeout's over now. Okay, now you've heard how the subject of Susan's talk got there. And you heard the basic program that we were using at the time, a basic program we were using at the time as the SAR package. As George described, the SAR package basically consisted of 4 A1s, 2 pairs of 2, and 2 helicopters, plus any support we could get from forward air controllers. And of course, we had an airborne coordination center, airborne king. Okay, that's the basic package. They went out, They were successful on one. Okay? And of course, that package was modified several times to meet individual known situations. Now, Susan here, Susan Crosby, is going to tell you the rest of the story, okay? What transpired after that. Looks like a successful, partly successful rescue. One guy got back, one guy missing, presumed captured. Okay, presumed scarfed up by the bad guys. Susan here got interested in the front seater, Colonel Carter, Colonel Carter Luna, at a relatively young age. Her mom gave her an MIA bracelet. You'll see it on her left arm there, I believe. Gave her an MIA bracelet when she was 14 years old. Now, I'm not going to tell you how old she is now. That's impolite, right? But suffice it to say, for half a century, she's been wearing that bracelet. She went into law enforcement, and the skills that a law enforcement, a detective gets, are the skills that she used to research this. And she researched it exhaustively, and now has some information for us about how that research, what that research resulted. Susan. Yeah, I'm gonna give it to you, but my leg is so bad.
Quit complaining.
Give me just a minute so I can switch the PowerPoint over. Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
Away we go. So, as was mentioned, my presentation is about Colonel Carter Luna, and as George has already stated, his lost date was March 10th, 1969, in Savannah, Laos.
Susan, Mike. Down.
Put down.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah,
It's awful loud to me. Okay. This is the last known photograph of Colonel Luna when he was at Ubon. And I guess I kind of jumped ahead of myself here. But let me say that I'm not a professional speaker. So bear with me through this. Last presentation I gave last year, I had 20 minutes notice to prepare for it. So hopefully I'll do better with this presentation because I've had a lot of time to prepare for it. And I want to thank George for inviting me to be here. I never ever imagined I'd be here with a group of pilots that served over there during the time Colonel Luna did. I was sitting in the lobby last night waiting for us to have dinner and listening to a lot of people having conversations and just mingling, and I thought, wow, there's a lot of years of experience here tonight, and also, again, tonight. So I know there's a lot of stories that have been told and a lot more stories to be told. So my story is just, from what people have said to me, a little bit unique, a little bit different. And I hope I can hold your interest. And after dinner, I don't want to hear heads hitting the tables. So just try to bear with me, though. I've included some music on some of the slides to try to make it a little bit more reminiscent of the time, music that a lot of you can identify with. Music that I grew up with as a young teenager who didn't really know where Laos was, but it was a time in my life where I was wearing jeans with peace sign patches and a peace sign necklace and, you know, braided hair and all that kind of stuff. So, let me get here for a minute.
The road is long, with many a winding turn. There so on we go.
And this is also the first time I've ever done a PowerPoint presentation, so navigating the laptop and my notes is a little bit of a challenge too. So, this is actually a photograph I took when I was in Laos in March. There's a place called Quang Si Waterfalls. It's some of the most beautiful water you would ever see. And near the waterfalls, they have this bear sanctuary, and literally you're just separated by a chain link fence from where the walkway is, about a 6-foot-high chain link fence. So I got some pretty great close-up photographs of the bears there. This is the waterfalls. This is a little cartoon that I came across somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
If you can't read the bottom, it says there goes that flying outfit from NKP. I saw it on Facebook or something. And as we know, Colonel Luna was at the 8th Tactical Fire Wing. And he was with the 435th in Ubon. So this is the bracelet. Many of you probably had one or remember them from the 70s. They were popular. My mother was a psychiatric nurse with the VA hospital for 33 years. So when we were living in Miami, she went to one of the veteran organizations that had an office in the hospital. Just randomly picked this bracelet out of the box and gave it to me. So I was about 14 years old, and as somebody mentioned, half a decade later, I still have the bracelet. But people see the bracelet, if they know what it is, they ask me, you know, was that your father, your grandfather, or a relative? And my answer is it's somebody that I never knew. So for years, I thought about going to Laos to honor Colonel Luna, but honestly, I didn't even know where Laos was. So I knew it was something that I would probably never accomplish in my lifetime. But I started doing research on the internet. I wanted to know who he was as a person, who he was as an aircraft pilot. And through my research, I've become acquainted with a lot of people that either knew him directly or indirectly. And it's actually been pretty amazing every time I have a contact or find some information, something new comes out of it, and it keeps me motivated to keep looking for information about what his ultimate fate was. And it also leads me to believe that this is my purpose in life. This is what I'm supposed to be doing, because some of the things that have come to my attention, they're just meant to be. You can't explain it any other way. So I've read a lot of investigative reports that have been done through the years, and I've read the search and rescue log on the day that he was lost. I've communicated with Al Rutina, who was in the back seat and was rescued. I've communicated with other officers that flew with him. So it's been pretty amazing that 54 years later, I'm able to have contact with these people, including George. That was phenomenal. When I bought his book, right before I did make my first trip to Southeast Asia, I thought, well, let me see if I can find this guy and contact him, and I found him through Facebook, and we made contact with each other, and he told me when I returned to the States to give him a call, we would talk in depth, and so we've done that a couple times. But I'm very grateful that he invited me here tonight, and that the A1 Association invited me here. So I'm not from the government. There's no class that teaches you to do what I do with my research, so I'm pretty much self-educated and rely a lot on my investigative skills from being a detective. So I've had the privilege of meeting Pat Luna, who is Colonel Luna's wife. And this is their wedding photograph. And I met her initially when I made a request through the Air Force to find out who his next of kin was. And through all my research, I never focused a lot on his family. I was more focused on him. But in 2018, I decided I'd really like to know who his next of kin is and if I could make contact with them. So I prepared a very heartfelt letter and sent it to the Air Force, and they sent it to her. And on Memorial Day 2018, I got a phone call from her. So after we shed some tears over the phone, we've become very close. And in June of this year, I went to Clearwater and met her and one of her sons and spent a few days with her. And she would love to be here tonight, but unfortunately, she has some health issues. She's 91 years old. She's extremely sharp, but unfortunately right now she does have some health problems and she couldn't be here. She wanted me to express her gratitude to everyone that was involved with the attempted rescue of her husband and the ongoing efforts that still exist to have him repatriated. So, like I mentioned, I think my law enforcement career has been very helpful to my investigations, and also I've actually gone to Laos 3 times. In 2019, and then in this year, I went to the remote areas, which is seen in this slide here. In March when I went, on the left is my driver, and in the middle is the translator that we hired. And we went into a very remote area of central Laos and to the nearest village to where Colonel Luna was last known alive. I'm going to jump around a little bit here. So during the course of my research, a document that was very important to me was the search and rescue log from March 10th, '69. I couldn't find it. Of course, being a civilian and not being a family member, you know, I have certain limitations on access to information. But a fellow researcher who I know, I just randomly asked him one day, help me out, where can I find the search and rescue logs, which has a minute-by-minute accounting of that rescue mission that George led. He said, I have it. And it just so happened that the date of March 10th was commingled with some other dates that he was looking at on a case he was investigating. So he sent them to me. So this is an example of what a search and rescue log looks like on the day George led his rescue mission. You can see here PAPAYA 02, and then a lot of language here. And I have 2 sets of logs. Some of the handwriting is more legible than others. So, play the music for a minute.
In this stereo part of the city where the sun refused to shine.
This is the coordinate
Tell me there ain't no
where they were.
use in trying. My little girl, you're so young and brave. And one thing I know is true.
So, to make my life a little less complicated, what I had to do, what I felt I had to do, was take that information and put it into a Excel spreadsheet. So a lot of the terminology in that log was foreign to me. And it took a lot of time just to decipher what some of the abbreviations were. And some of them, I've asked other people that were in the military, and some of them couldn't even tell me what they were. But I got to the point where pretty much everything that was abbreviated, I was able to determine what it meant. So throughout most of my research, I've done a lot of spreadsheets because it just becomes the easiest way to keep track of information, and it's easy to read. This is the radio and the beeper that these two guys used the day that they were hit. This is a sample of a report that's been done by the DPAA, who you got familiar with this morning if you were here. But they prepare these investigative reports. When I find them, usually the names of the witnesses that they've interviewed have been redacted. But I have a second source where I can find these documents, and usually the names aren't redacted. Some of the North Vietnamese former soldiers that they interview in the course of these recovery cases have been interviewed 2 or 3 times. So if I can't make a list by name of who's saying what, it's very complicated to try to determine who is saying what and what information is of value. And I have a bad habit of doing this, and I'm already aware that I'm doing it. So my mind is going faster than my words, or vice versa. And I don't want to leave anything out that I feel is important, so I'm going to maybe go back to my notes for a minute before I go to another slide. The most likely conclusion on the date that Colonel Luna was shot down was that he was killed that afternoon, possibly before the rescue of his backseater, but if not before that, probably shortly thereafter. It's been consistent with the NVA soldiers' statements that he was confronted by a team of NVAs, and he pulled his pistol and he was shot and killed with an AK-47. Absent any other information, that's what we have to believe happened that day because it's been the most consistent information that I've read. He was supposedly then buried nearby. So, kind of fast forwarding to today, but through the last 5 decades, of course our government is still actively pursuing recovering the missing. And their missions are very intensive, labor intensive, cost intensive. They go into Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, and have teams of people with all types of specialties, forensic anthropologists, bomb specialists, medics, photographers, just a whole slew of personnel, and also utilizing the local personnel to assist them when they're doing the different parts of their mission. So it's a very in-depth process to get to the point of trying to find a grave, in this case a grave, or to find remains of an aircraft or remains of a service member. And you have to realize that all these years later, there's a lot of factors that play into being able to identify someone as far as the soil, what can be found all these years later. And it's just a tremendous undertaking, and It's amazing that they are as successful as they are with making recoveries. So this is a letter from 1969 that was sent to Colonel Luna's parents, who are no longer alive, but it was sent to them and sent to his wife, informing them that he was missing in action. I didn't see this letter until I made my first trip to Southeast Asia, and I was actually in Laos, and my son and I were doing some work on the computer, and I came across these letters. And at that point, it really changed my outlook on Colonel Luna. At the time I read these letters, he became more than a name on a bracelet to me. It just really impacted me when I read these letters. So this is a map that I've made some comments on, and I'm not real proficient with these maps as far as identifying locations, but that's a work in progress. So this is the last known position of Colonel Luna. When I was in Laos in March, I actually got to this location. This is a cassava field over here, which had recently been harvested, so it was easy to walk through. Not easy, it was uneven ground, but it was clear. This is a road right here, part of the original Ho Chi Minh Trail. So my driver and I, we came in here, and he walked with his GPS into this area to hit the coordinate of where he was last known alive. We also went here and here to two sites that have been excavated, and both pilots' remains have been recovered and identified. They were shot down the same day. One was shot down first, the second one went looking for him, and he got hit. So fast forward from when those occurrences took place to the investigations by the DPAA through the years. They've learned from talking to these former MVA soldiers that this is a possible burial site in this general area for Colonel Luna. So we know he was last known alive in this area, and the back cedar was picked up in this general area, and this was identified as a possible burial site. They didn't excavate it, they did a surface sweep, they looked for metal, they didn't find anything. 2013, they talked to the same NVA soldiers, and now they say, oh no, it's over here, this is where he was buried. So they go over into this area twice, I think actually in 2012 and 2013, and they excavate and they don't find anything. But in the course of my research, I find a report that says this: strongly recommend excavating the original detailed location from 2006, which makes sense to me that if he was killed in this general area, that he might be buried here, not up here. As far as I know, nobody has gone back here. So again, a spreadsheet or a flow chart to try to help me keep everything straight. And this just shows these two sites, with the one from 06 and then 12 and 13. These two are actually very, very close together. But this helps me to keep track of what took place and information that was given to our government during the course of their investigations. So aside from the reports from the DPAA that I may come across, I also do a lot of research in the Library of Congress. There's a lot of information in there. If you have a family member or you know someone who may still be unaccounted for, the Library of Congress is a very good source. It's kind of tricky when you're looking for information, like a lot of different sites are. If you don't put in information in an exact way, you might not get a response. But generally speaking, if you put in the reference number that's assigned to that loss, you should find some information. These are some photographs from my 2019 trip. I had a conversation with somebody last night about this trip where I walked through this rice paddy to a cave. This trip, the driver I had didn't speak any English. He deviated from our route, wanted to take me to this cave. I didn't know why, but I knew I wasn't going to go inside it. These are two ladies when we were driving along the road that walked up to us, and he thinks they were asking for a ride, and he told them no. So that's kind of the response on her face when she was told we weren't going to give her a ride. And that's a car in the area of where we were by that rice paddy. This is typical transportation in Laos. Many people do not own vehicles. This is pretty common in the rural areas to see people traveling around like that. A lot of you guys, of course, saw things from the sky, but you haven't seen things from the ground. And this is 50 years later, but it's still pretty rugged out there. This is a typical bridge we encountered where we didn't want to drive the pickup truck over, so we go around like other people obviously had. So I knew when I went into my first trip in the rural areas that there was a lot of unexploded ordnances over there, but I didn't know that I was going to be so close to them. We were driving on the road going up into this remote area, and this is a photograph of a NGO searching for UXOs, I don't know, maybe 30 feet off the road. So there's millions of unexploded ordnances over there. They'll never be able to clear them all, but there's constant ongoing efforts by different organizations to clear them. It also is part of the challenge of doing these recovery missions, because when they go in to excavate, of course, they have to make sure that the area is cleared of any unexploded bombs. The bombs are everywhere. They're in villages, they're under schools, they're under houses. They're everywhere. Beer Lao is very good beer. That's how we would end our day, and it's very reasonably priced. Like many things over there. The guest house that we stayed at in this remote area cost $6 a night for basically a motel room. No frills, but clean. So this is the village we went to in March, Bangkok Mok. It's very close to where Colonel Luna was last known alive. This is the assistant village chief who we met when we got there, and he agreed to go out with us to some different locations. You have to imagine what he and all his fellow villagers might have thought when this pickup truck pulls up and 3 people get out of it that don't look like them. And fortunately, our translator was able to communicate with them and tell them why we were there and the assistance we would like from them. So when we left the village, he directed us a couple miles away down a dirt path to an excavated site, which is where Crosby had crashed. And that was in 1967. And this is his crash site that was excavated. We were able to walk right into that off of this dirt path. And because it had been excavated, we knew it was safe to walk into because it had already been cleared of any possible UXOs. So 1967, he was shot down. His remains were found in 2019, and in 2020, they were identified. That's 53 years later. That's a lifetime for many people, but not uncommon in these situations. So then we left that area, and the chief wanted to take us to another spot. Now, I was already somewhat familiar with Crosby. I had seen some maps, and I had a good idea about Crosby's site. But the second site we went to, we didn't know who it belonged to. But we were able to also walk into this site right off of another path, and I conferred with this other investigator that I know, and he said that he thought that that was probably Cogdell's site. And I concluded after some further investigation when I came back home that it was. So he was again shot down the same day as Crosby because he went in looking for Crosby and then he got shot down. And his crash site was found in 1994 and his remains were identified the same year. So that was 27 years to recover and identify him. So, Colonel Luna was in a F-4D Phantom. This is actually the exact jet that he was in. During my research, I always wanted to find a picture of his aircraft, and I couldn't find it anywhere. One day it popped up on Facebook. Somebody had posted it, and I knew it was his by the serial number on the back. It was 722. So I contacted the person that posted it to try to find out where they got it from. They didn't answer me, so I don't know where the source of it was for them. But another contact of mine, and I have to say, contacts are extremely important to me, and that's something also that's grown out of my law enforcement background, where contacts with other agencies and other people that were essential to my investigations were invaluable to me. So in this investigation, it's the same thing. The contacts I've made have been unbelievable, really, especially, again, all these years later. So, contact of mine had this photo of Colonel Robin Olds, who I'm sure most of you veterans know of him. He's a legend. But this is, I believe, was in 1967, and it's the same aircraft that Colonel Luna flew, same serial number. And Robin Olds was the wing commander at the 8th Tactical Fighter Wing before Colonel Luna got there. He was already gone when Colonel Luna got there. And for those that don't know, part of the reason he's such a legend is the mustache. It was not necessarily approved, and from what I've read, when he came back to the States, the first thing he was ordered to do was get rid of the mustache. But it was, from what I understand, quite a camaraderie builder with his men when he grew the mustache over there. So again, this is in March this year when we were going to the colonel's last known position. This is the cassava field that we walk through. That's my translator. She's a professional guide, but she's not from this part of the country, and she does tours mostly with tourists. This was something way different for her, but she was dressed in her typical daily business attire, which really wasn't quite appropriate for where we were, but she didn't realize it when she went into the situation. But she was a tremendous asset to us being able to speak the language. So this is in the cassava field, and this is the location back in here where Colonel Luna was last known to be alive 54 years ago. Pretty moving experience for me to be standing there 54 years later, someplace that I never thought I would go to, because I didn't even know where it was. And to back up how I went to Southeast Asia, to begin with, my son works for the US government, and at the time I made my first trip, he was stationed in Bangkok, Thailand, and I went to visit him, and we went to Laos for a weekend, but we did not go into this remote area. But once I realized how close Laos was to where he was in Bangkok, I said, I can do this. This is someplace I can go. So that's really what brought me there. If it weren't for him, I probably never would have made it. It's a huge undertaking to go there, especially in these remote areas. So here we are at the last known position of Colonel Luna, and Chris, my driver, he stepped back in there to the woods with his GPS to find the coordinate that we were interested in. And he's walking back out, and he says, "Susan, turn around and look at this." And there's a purple flower. And there's some berries. Now, it may not seem like much to be talking about, but those were the only things in that area that were blooming. There was just nothing else like that. No other flowers, no other berries. So we took it as a sign that we were in the right place. There's just no other way to interpret it. So after traveling 10,000 miles, we gathered up some dirt, which I brought back to Pat Luna when I met her in June. So we left this location, we went back to our truck, we went back on what was the Ho Chi Minh Trail, to another coordinate that we thought was Colonel Luna's possible burial site. It was about 100 yards from here, and I showed that on the map before. But since then, doing more research, I realized that we were probably a little bit off on that coordinate. We probably need to be another couple 100 yards further in off the road. So after this, we went back to Bangkok Mok, the village. We stopped back in town first and got some food and water for the people in the village. And I had bought toys from the dollar store months earlier and mailed them to my son so I could pick them up when I got to Malaysia, which is where he is now. And then we took the toys to the village also and interacted with the children quite a bit. I had a lot of pencils. I took them in a pencil sharpener, and I was demonstrating how to sharpen a pencil. These children, I don't think, had ever seen anybody sharpen a pencil before. It was pretty amazing. This is a photo I've shown to a lot of people, and everyone just is very stunned by this photo. It's just the expressions on both their faces. Of course, again, they don't know who we are. They don't really understand why we're there. So this is the village elder, one of two in this village. He's 75 years old. We brought soup and they boiled water, so he has his bowl of soup there. he tried to push the bowl over to me to have me eat it. And I pushed it back and said, no, that's for you. We brought these things for you. And we interviewed him, and he was living in this village during the war, 75 years old. He remembered going into a deep hole during the war when their village was being bombed. And he told us that the NVA would feed them when they were evacuated, so to speak, from their village. And this is a bowl he was eating the soup out of. He told us that it was made from a bomb casing. I don't know if it was or not, but it's very rustic, looked like it had been hammered. So they were and they still are, very industrious people. They make use of, through the years, aircraft parts that they've found, when they're farming the land or wandering the land. They've scavenged lots of what was there. This little girl, she kind of stood back from the rest of them, and as we're passing out toys and books and things and playing little games with them, she hadn't been given anything. So I gave her, there's a little barrette in her hair, you might not see it, and this little $1.25 vinyl tote bag, and she just put that up on her arm like that, and you think, she was carrying around a $500 purse or something. So I have a friend who's a Marine that does leather work, and before I went over there, I asked him if he could make me a couple things that I could give as gifts for the village chief or whoever was assisting us. So this is me presenting a custom-made wallet to the assistant village chief, and then I also gave one to the elder. And this is one of the ladies in the village pulverizing rice. So this is a crater that was in the village. That's a school right behind there. The crater's here, the bathroom's over here. And this is a bathroom. Just a squat toilet. Kind of like what we might know as an outhouse, but our outhouses maybe are a little bit more upscale even than this. But that's what you have to use when you're out there in those remote areas. I gotta play the music. Well, maybe. So these are the latest numbers related to the unaccounted for from the Vietnam War, and specifically in Laos.
The changing of sunlight to moonlight, reflections of my life. Oh, how you feel.
You have to listen to the music for a minute.
The greetings of people.
I've talked to guys that are veterans and asked them what songs they remember from their service time, and they've given me a list of them, and then I've taken songs that I remember, and that's how I selected these.
All my sorrow, sad tomorrow, take me back to my home. All my crying, I feel I'm crying. Take me
So this is another one of my charts. This is taken from the DPAA website, and it shows the recoveries that they've made year-to-date 2023 from the Vietnam War, from the Korean War, from World War II, 2022, 2021, and combination of those 2 years and year-to-date 2023. You can see 7 from Vietnam, what's that say, 56 and 235, I think. I'll just let that be. And these are some photographs of Colonel Luna at his different ranks. 1976 at Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado, they built a physiological training center and they named it after him. He was also a physiologist. So, I'm almost done. A lot of people have been asking me why I've done what I've done as far as the research on someone that I didn't even know. Why have I made 3 trips to Laos? And I guess it's just happened. I've never really set out with a plan, but as I started to do the research on Colonel Luna, maybe some of my past life experiences kicked in where you want to know the answer. You want to know who did it or how they did it and so on. So I think a lot of my background has driven me to continue doing this research. And I have 2 websites. This one has a lot of information about the process of the research I do and sort of a diary of some of my experiences, especially with my trips. I also have this website and kind of an effort I'm involved in with my driver in Laos. He has a business doing motorbike tours, but when he met me, he took another interest in getting involved with the MIA issues. So he and I are kind of teamed up to do tours for any family members, veterans, or other interested parties who may want to go to Laos. More so with me doing background research on someone and providing information through a guide that I've written on how to travel to Southeast Asia, and then with him doing the actual tours. I can't afford to go over there every time somebody wants to go. And that's my email. On the back counter, I have some postcards that have all this information for anybody who wants to take it. Here's another sound effect. I found this on the internet and I thought it was interesting.
We knew it right away. Jim said we're hit, and I looked out my mirror and I saw we were losing a lot of fuel out of the starboard wing. I didn't know how bad we were hit. I checked all my instruments and everything looked good. But then I noticed that one of my controls were beginning to stiffen up on me, and I was beginning to lose control. I told Jim, we discussed what happens if we have to punch out, and shortly after that I lost complete control. And the aircraft started doing just wild maneuvers, and our wingman all the time was shouting, "Eject, eject," and he really was good, he did, but we felt it was time to go anyway.
I thought this was an interesting statement.
We knew it right away, Jim.
Just a little disclosure here that a lot of my information, most of my information comes through other sources, and that's all I have to work with. What I learned firsthand is small by comparison. I'll leave it with this song, and then George is going to come back and say a couple of things.
Okay, we're about through, but let me tell you kind of an interesting story. It was in 2001 that I started writing the book. It took about 7 months. I had it finished as a manuscript just after 9/11. I submitted it to the Smithsonian Institute Press through an acquisition editor. These are the really senior, smart people that they hire. That are voracious readers, and they're the ones that decide whether it's of value to submit to the editorial review board, which is where the lawyers are to see if they publish it, they'll get sued, and the financial people that are there that determine how many you print and how they make money out of it. Anyhow, it passed through those. I was offered a book contract in early 2002. The first thing that happens at that point is they want to come up with a title, that's a design of the dust jacket, and about 25, 30 words of an abstract of what it's about. And they're ready to start promoting the book, even though it's not going to be actually published for about another year. So you're working with the top tier. Once you sign the contract, then it changed. And here is an interesting story. They asked me for the cover quotes. Who would you suggest? And obviously I suggested Robin Olds, submitted his name, and probably a month or so later, I got a phone call from now not a major player with the Smithsonian Institute, probably somebody that was an intern from college or something, and he had called Robin Olds. This is probably February, March, April, something like that. And if you haven't talked with Robin Olds, he is something. Here's what he said. He called him and he said, have you received the manuscript and can you write a cover quote? And Robin said, I think I have. I think it's in the package over there on my desk under a couple Christmas presents that I still haven't opened. And he said, I'm sitting here in the mountains of Colorado, looking out a plate glass window at the White Mountains here. And if I have a choice between reading that manuscript and look at the mountains, what do you think I'm doing? Really put me on. So this young guy said, I don't know. I don't think I had very much luck. You better try and give him a call. So I thought, oh boy, I'm going to give the general now, Robbins, a call. And, how am I going to, I got to have a plan. So I thought, well, what I could do is suggest to him that I'll write 4, 5, 6 short 8, 9 word cover quotes and send them to him and let him select one. But you got to be kind of careful leading the witness there. So I called him, a few formalities, and I asked him about the manuscript. He said, it's still the same thing. I think it was still under the Christmas packages. He still hadn't opened. This was a month or so later. So I kind of edged into the cover quotes. He said, oh, no. I will read that, and I'll write something. Okay, yes, sir. A few more pleasantries, and I hung up. A little time comes by, and this young guy from Smithsonian called me again. He said, we got a cover quote from General Olds, we can't use it. What's wrong? So it's over 100 words, and way too long. And he said, maybe we can, cut a couple words out. I said, well, send it to me and let me read it. Well, it was 127 words. It's like a foreword. It's not a cover quote. And so I read it, and it was just so good. So I said, no, we got to use it. Well, as an author, you're up against it. They think they always know right because they know what sells. That's always their answer. Oh, we know what sells. But I pushed and pushed and pushed, and finally they agreed. And it is General Old's cover quote back. Let me read it to you, because it's pretty good. That others may live was their motto. And each of us who flew in that war knew, should our luck run out, they would be there. I cannot recount the times pilots were plucked out of the enemy territory or out of the jungle trees of Laos by those brave men whose call signs were Sandy and Jolly Green. Often they gave their own lives to save another. Greater love hath no man than that. To each of them I give my everlasting respect, admiration, and deep affection. Reach into your hearts as you read this book and understand the lengths to which men can love and support one another in times of stress. It will make you a bit prouder to be an American. How could you write anything better? Our days of Sandys are over, but I think we found another Sandy right here, somebody who was willing to go out and look for somebody they didn't know. We as Sandys went out to rescue somebody by a call sign. We had no idea who it was, didn't make any difference. It was American down in the weeds, and we were going after him. Fortunately, I think our passion, our vision has been transferred to other people who we are blessed to know and be part of. So thank you, Susan, for all you've done. You've carried the torch on that we don't have. So that's our story. Anybody got anything? We'll come along with that. Yes.
So, if Linda and I wanted to go to Laos, check around and see what it's like down there on the ground. What are we gonna spend, 20 grand, 10 grand? What's that gonna take?
So the most expensive part of the trip is the airfare from the US to somewhere in Southeast Asia. My last trip, I spent $5,000. Now keep in mind that I spent a week with my son in Malaysia. There was no expense there. We spent almost a week on Phuket Island in Thailand. No expense to me there. But the airfare I paid, that trip was around $2,000 round trip to, that was to Malaysia from Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm planning to go back in March of next year and looking at the airfare now to go to, let's say, Bangkok from Knoxville. It's up to $2,800 round trip. When you get over there, whether you go to Thailand or Vietnam first, it's probably going to be a little bit on the more pricey side for your accommodations. But once you get into Laos, as I described, especially in the remote areas where $6 a night, you can't beat that. And the food is very inexpensive. So the guides, he charges a per day price, which is very reasonable. And he actually will handle the accommodations and then charge that to you. Maybe even the meals, and then you just pay him a lump sum.
Not less than I thought it would be.
Yeah, it's really not as expensive as what I think most people would expect. And part of the money I spent, I spent a couple nights in Bangkok at a $150 a night hotel, a couple massages and things like that. So those little extras added up.
Oh, no.
But they were well deserved. But really, it does take a lot of planning. That's why I've written a guide, because I know some people that are interested in going over there. There's a lady whose father is still missing, and she will probably go with me in March. And so a lot of pre-planning that goes into it. But if you pick up one of those postcards I got back there, there's a link on the website to my guide. It should be pretty helpful to people.
Wow. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Susan, I want to give you a big hug, because you shocked me. I can't decide. You just get the plastic. Give me a hug, and you get a Skyraider Challenge coin.
Thank you very much. I've got a collection going.
Thank you. Beautiful.